right at the beginning, and how this is something that we talk about with all of our business school members and anyone who's joining the Future Females community. We try and encourage them to focus on knowing what the vision and mission is so that they can then use that to make sure that they're bringing the right sort of people into the team. One thing I haven't mentioned, which I think is worth mentioning, is the fact that we are also doing a giveaway at the end of this session. Do you want to chat about the giveaway?
I do, absolutely. Thank you, Flora. So for those of you who may not have tuned in to CEO Diaries before, every time we do a giveaway, and it is very simple to win, we essentially just want to encourage interaction, because even though it's me and Flora speaking, we are a community that really relies on our members supporting each other so we can all rise together. So during CEO Diaries, we are offering a free enrollment into what I think is one of our best programs, particularly if you are thinking about planning next year, planning for your launches of your new business or a product or service. And it's called the Level Up Launch Library. We sell it for nearly $200, and it literally does what it says on the label. It helps you to level up your launches. So it gives you training on how to do an Instagram launch, LinkedIn launch. We give you our launch Trello board, which is a project management tool with literally every task, so you can feel confident you're forgetting nothing. And all you need to do to win it is just comment, ask questions, share from your experiences as well. So yeah, Flora, I think I'm not sure if you spoke about this, but I do want to talk a bit about how to start as a volunteer-led organization for people tuned in. I think one of the reasons we hosted the CEO Diaries on this topic was because a lot of female founders founders generally don't have resources to hire and end up feeling very stuck and burnt out trying to do it all themselves. Have you touched on that, or shall I go into it?
No, I haven't really. I just mentioned that we started as a volunteer company too. So yeah, go for it.
Okay, perfect. So, one of the most important things that I share with women building businesses who need more capacity, you literally cannot get to the bottom of your to-do list, is to not undervalue your mission, right? So
apologies. I think I just tried to make you the main screen, and I think I might have kicked you off.
That's okay. I'm back. This is our dynamic. It's good fun. So yeah, one of the things I so often hear is like, I need a team, but I can't pay them. And I definitely can't pay them market rates. And I think this is the point where a lot of founders end up getting stuck, right? And I've been there as well. And you think, well, I just need to keep working harder and harder, burning myself out so then I can bring people in. But what I would encourage you to do is think about what you can offer outside of just purely a salary. So for Future Females, for example, and probably for most of you, because I know our community is very purpose-driven, don't devalue purpose, right? Future Females, our purpose is very clear and very strong. We believe in female empowerment, in economic empowerment of women, and we deliver this through entrepreneurial training. We want you to take control, right, of your own futures, to build a business that's going to deliver on those dreams for you. That is a purpose that a lot of people would get behind and would essentially extract equity from being involved in, even though it's not a financial transaction. And like, to make it really tangible, when we started Future Females, we didn't have any money coming in. We did everything free, which is a whole separate topic I can speak about. But because of that, we relied on volunteers. And a lot of these volunteers, myself and Serena were, but if I think about one of our now program directors, Sasha, she was in events management and she was burnt out from just planning these events like day after day. And what she wanted to was to be part of something she believed in. And that is what the purpose connection allowed her to do. And we had it like a role. She had deliverables, she had KPIs, we met weekly, because there is still a value exchange. It's just not a financial value exchange. So if you are sitting at that stuck point I was just talking about, like, I need people, but I can't offer them anything, I really want to reframe that for you. You can offer them something, particularly if you think probably a lot of you are in corporate or thinking about leaving corporate to start your business, or left like me. When you are working 9 to 5 or 8 to 8, building someone else's dream, The value of being part of something you can believe in and that is making a true impact is massive. So yes, I would just encourage, if anyone's there, to sit and document your purpose if you haven't. What is that higher level mission? The beauty of this as well, and I'm going to ask Flora to share her story in a minute, is that you find people who, you can learn skills. And in startups, let's be honest, everyone's kind of a generalist because you don't even know what skills you're going to need in a month or in a year from now. So what I always say is more important is to bring values aligned people together and recruit for attitude over skill set. Obviously, there's a base level of skill set, but attitude is the thing that sees you through. And if I share with you the 3 first volunteers outside of me and Serena, Sasha now runs our global accelerator program in 6 countries. Phil runs our foundation, which is our NGO that gives back to gender-based violence survivors. And then Flora was actually our first official hire and is clearly still running the business and actually heads up all of our marketing and marketing operations team. And I really take that right back to the fact that a purpose brings the right people together more than a fixed job opportunity with a fixed salary. Flores, do you want to share your story with everyone who's tuned in?
Yes, of course. So I obviously, having seen it firsthand, I obviously very much agree with everything you've said there. And for me, so I joined Future Females. The way I found Future Females was I actually attended an event which was a Future Females event. And the reason I attended was because I wanted to go there to network and meet other people and sort of find out what other entrepreneurs were doing. But after attending the event, I felt so strongly that this was a movement I actually wanted to be a part of. I waited until, I must have been the very last person waiting that day to speak to, it was actually Serena and Phil who were speaking that day. So I waited and I waited. And I finally spoke to Phil and I said, I just really believe in what you're doing. And I think that you're doing amazing work and I'd love to also help out. So I obviously met with Lauren and Serena, and they actually were at the point where they needed somebody at least part-time to support on the admin side. So as Lauren said, up until then, there had been a team of volunteers who obviously were all incredible and still do amazing work within the company. But they also had full-time jobs. And so there's only ever so much you can do with that. And there was obviously a bit of a gap on the admin side. So I came on as the intern, and the thing that really sold me was I remember the first meeting and we talked about the Future Females 5 core values. And I felt so aligned to each one of those that it was such an easy decision for me, whether or not even the role was going to be right. I just felt so married to the actual goal of the company that I was like, I will do whatever needs to be done within this business so that we can make this happen, And obviously, I'm still here now, but it's been such a consistent sort of true north for me in my career through Future Females is that I know that we're aligned on that. And as we've recruited, we really do. I always say this, we have such an incredible team at Future Females, but we really, really do. There's not one person who isn't aligned with that vision. And so, yes, okay, there's going to be, strengths and weaknesses of each person. But the fact that we're all aligned on that makes it actually very easy to work together because we all know what we're aiming for.
Absolutely. Thank you, Flores. I want to actually just drop this question. We'll pop this question up on the screen from Genevieve because you did just start talking about our values. So Genevieve's asking, how do you reiterate your values to your team regularly? So I might just share how we came up with them, and Flores, if you want to speak a little about how we keep them alive and well for our team and then also extended team being our ambassadors. So Genevieve, this is a really good question. And I just want to take it back to values documentation because, some of you might know, Serena and I, we only met 3 months before starting Future Females. So we were effective strangers. We'd crossed paths very little. We ended up coming together because we were both pivoting into female entrepreneurship in South Africa at the time. And So we hosted our first event, but we realized we knew nothing about each other. So what we did was we sat down and we literally just said, what is important to you? What are the things you will never compromise on? What does entrepreneurship mean to you? What doesn't it mean? And we ended up, we were in this room in the middle of a co-working space with this huge whiteboard that we documented all of our our different beliefs on. And then we found, what are those common threads? And they became the values that underpinned Future Females. I'll give you one example. And actually, when you're setting values, one of the important things is that it is specific enough to be meaningful. So, for example, Future Females, one of our values is inclusive. This could mean many things, but for us, if we look at it from a gender lens, it means that we include men in the conversation. One of our shared common beliefs was that we can't close the gender gap with only 50% of the world focused on it, and particularly the 50% who don't currently control the wealth and a lot of the decision making. So we have male advisors, male speakers, male coaches. Hells yeah, we want our male supporters to also be opening the doors and accelerating this change. So that is one of our values. And when I say specific, it's quite polarizing. There are a lot of people, I can see Genevieve tuned in on YouTube saying, here, here. Amazing. You have that common belief, so Future Females is going to resonate for you. When we launched Future Females, we did have some very feminist groups challenging this and saying they don't want to be part of a female-focused community that includes men. Each to their own, but that just means we're not right for them. So that's how we set our values. And I would encourage to set yours as well. Always take it down that level to like, what does it really mean? And therefore, who would be attracted and who wouldn't? Because the stronger and almost the more polarizing, the easier it's going to be to bring the right people in. So then to your question of how we keep these values alive and well, Flores, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, for sure. Quite simply, I know it's going to sound very basic, but we talk about it a lot. We talk about it in the office. We talk about it with our team. We mention it in meetings. We try and pull it into as much of our copy as we can too. And when we're building out our content and our, the sort of product offerings and looking at that sort of thing, we fall back on that always. So with the team, when we're brainstorming, when we're thinking about new ideas, the values are the base of how we make decisions, essentially. And yeah, making sure that any content we're creating feels collaborative or feels inclusive, and things like one of my favorite parts of how we pulled community driven into making sure that we are consistent every single year, which some of you might have already seen this. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to go and please take the survey. But at the end of each year, we do a community survey, which is basically our opportunity to ask you what you've struggled with this year, what you need help with most next year. And it basically means that we can look at that and we can look at the data of the sort of people who are in our community, and we can stay aligned to making sure that we're offering the right sort of services, resources that people actually need. As I said at the beginning, one of the reasons or in fact, probably the key reason we made community driven one of the core values is because we knew the needs and support that female entrepreneurs need is going to change over time. It's not going to be completely static. I think somebody's just mentioned in the chat now also, sort of going into a recession or having the economic difficulties that we're currently having, or that we're going to see more of. You can't preempt that in terms of, 5 years ago when we were sitting there thinking, what are we going to build? And at that point, obviously, female entrepreneurship was on the rise and it was all very exciting. Obviously, there is a case for the fact that during economic or market problems, that a lot of people do turn to entrepreneurship. So we saw this during COVID, that a lot of people were made redundant and therefore they wanted to take ownership and control over their income. And they then wanted to start a business that they could then be a little bit more in control of their future. So, from that perspective, you can see increases in entrepreneurship in times when you might not have expected it, and vice versa. And so we needed to always stay flexible. And obviously being community driven allows us to do that. As I mentioned, if anybody hasn't taken the community survey yet, please do. You'll see the posts on our social channels today. And yeah, as I say, it means that we can really make sure that the resources that we're putting out there are going to be the best ones that are going to support you in the coming year. So yeah.
Thanks, Floors. Thank you for that. I love that we've, shifted the conversation a little bit to tackling this question that I've popped up on the screen, because I think it's a nice segue into who to hire first. Because yes, of course, whether there is an economic meltdown or not, every hire, if you are paying, and we'll move on from volunteers to paid roles, is of course going to affect your bottom line. So who do you hire first and why? And my biggest advice is to hire for revenue generating roles first. And I'm going to circle back to Flora. But what I mean by that is, who can you hire who is going to increase your bottom line? Is it a salesperson or a marketing person? Typically, they're the two, or potentially a strategic partnerships or sponsorships person. Bring in someone, and a good salesperson, they can bring back between 4 to 10 times their own salary, depending on your business model. So hire for the people who are going to increase your profit before then hiring for operations. If you are the person in your business, and so often you are as the founder, that is the salesperson and is the marketer, which was my instance, then on the flip side, you should hire the person who's going to give you back most of your time so you can focus on generating revenue. So I'm that person in Future Females, or particularly I was at the start. And so what I did was look at my own time and Serena's time as well. And what are the things that are really just sapping us? And it's typically a lot of the administrative things, right? Customer service, posting on social, managing community forums. We have a Facebook group, setting up events, speaking to speakers, all of those things that actually take up a lot of time, but are not overtly, like they're not strategic. So you should be able to bring in someone fairly cost effectively to manage it for you. So that is why we hired an intern first, and it happened to be Flora. And thank God Flora has amazing strategic skills as well. But it happened to be Flora. And so I didn't hire myself first. When Flora joined, I still wasn't taking a salary, neither was Serena. But what Flora allowed us to do was have all of our time back to then focus on profit. So whether we are in a bit of a recession or not, actually in a recession, this advice is probably even more important. Hire for revenue generation, because it's just another lever you can pull. Because instead of doing 10 calls a day to partners, you could do 20 or 50 or 100. Serena, when she was on CEO Diaries a little while ago, being our COO, she was asked, what's something you would have done differently earlier? And she actually said, we put in too many operational processes and systems in the early days. We actually invested too much time in that before we had reached product market fit. And then things have to change. So prioritize sales and marketing before your operations. The one counter to that, if you think finance is an operational function, definitely have your finance function sorted as well. So in addition to, hiring for revenue creation, get an accountant, because if you don't actually know where your profit is coming from and what lever you can pull to accentuate it, then regardless of your hires, you're not going to be able to grow effectively. Loving all these questions coming through. Let me pop another one up. I see people sharing as well. Janine and Charlene, amazing. Thank you for sharing your input as we go through. I'm going to pop up Hasina. How do you deal introducing a new concept that people are unaware of and getting no feedback or interest? So I'm not exactly sure if you're speaking like generally about market acceptance or if you're speaking about getting an employee bought in. So I'll speak generally, but if you want to add a little bit more information, Hasina, then Flora and I can give you feedback. Flora was talking about constantly reiterating our values, because that is how people connect into Future Females being a purpose-led organization. So I would say similarly with a concept that people are unaware of, it comes from communicating. And a very, very simple framework is your I help. I help blah achieve blah by doing blah. That is kind of the sentence that I would say is your value proposition, right? You need to hone, particularly if you're not getting feedback. How can you be even more specific with who you're supporting, what problem you're solving for them, and what the outcome is? Business is all about experimentation. So don't feel despondent that perhaps you're not getting traction. It takes a long time. I've had 4 failed businesses. I've been in entrepreneurship for over 10 years, and it takes time, and it does take like removal of any ego, because sometimes the feedback you get from the market you don't want to hear. At least that's in my experience. And then pivoting takes a little bit longer, but I would just say keep at it and keep listening, right? Flora's just been talking about a survey that we've got out there. Our strategy at Future Females is very simple. We ask you guys, our community, what do you want? And then we make it. So if you're not getting feedback, firstly, aim for structured feedback. So perhaps issue a survey with some questions around how you can solve needs, and then really embed that into what it is you're offering. Hope that's helpful. Genevieve, I know you are a woman, but thank you. I was just speaking generally about one of our values there. Cool. So let me just have a look at these questions. Flora, did you want to add anything to that, or shall I pop another question up?
Maybe just a little bit. It's sort of just building on what you were saying. So one of the things that we found really useful, just in terms of like making sure that your product is market, that the market fit is there, is so yes, our community surveys and that sort of thing is great for getting feedback on the actual resources that we need and that sort of thing. But it also means that we have a really direct, clear picture of what our community's problems are. And we make sure that when we're then marketing, we use the same sort of language that they've been using so that they can recognize the problem in themselves. So just in terms of like, trying to work out whether or not you have got a product that there is a need for, or trying to understand why people might not be understanding your product correctly, then doing something like a community survey is amazing, because the feedback you get, you can then use that for your marketing to make sure that you like reposition your products better, or maybe it is literally just a case of they're not understanding the language that you're using. They're not seeing their problem in the solution that you're offering. And so it might just be something as simple as changing the language, or changing the visuals so that they can relate better, or something like that. So there's definitely, in terms of how you can use the feedback from your audience, it's amazing for making sure that your marketing is aligned correctly and stuff too.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Floors. I think it might be a nice segue just to kind of the second topic within this CEO Diaries, which is around creating a company culture. And a lot of the things we've touched on, being the values, the value proposition, the concepts, of course, the people, defines that. But I want to share a perspective, which is, some of you might be sitting here going, I don't need a culture yet, it's just me. But I would really encourage you to, there's actually, if you Google culture map, you can get a 1-page like free fillable template on how to define your culture. The thing about culture is it's like brand. If you don't define it, it will define itself. So it's never too soon to define what your company culture is, particularly because it's often that culture internally that ends up becoming the brand and the culture that lives externally, being in your community and with your customer base. So I would definitely think through that. Like, what is it that you want to create? And again, I'll give you an example. One of our, I guess, principles at Future Females, or one of the things I would say that governs our company, is we have a high performance culture with a lot of autonomy. And so what that means is people who come in, they're expected to deliver. There's not a lot of micromanagement. So if someone's not delivering, it really is on them. So that's just one of the things that almost unspokenly is part of the Future Females culture. Why is this important to do and set those principles out? And it will evolve over time. Is when you're bringing people in, whether it is a volunteer or a freelancer or a team member or a co-founder, you need to have the structures in place that allow people to thrive in that environment. For us, for example, KPIs and goals and performance tracking is key, because everyone is also, a lot of our team is remote. They're off doing their own things, delivering their own jobs. And so what we have is that freedom, but a structured daily reporting meeting where everyone comes and says, this is exactly what I've delivered. So we had this as well for when we were volunteer run. Everyone had a job description, everyone had KPIs, and every week when we met at that point, everyone updated on their commitments. So it's worth setting that culture up front, because then you're going to hire for the people that fit that as well. Particularly in the early stages, culture is designed and defined by the first people in your organization. So let's say you're a two-man band and you're bringing in a third. If that person is not a good cultural fit, that's a third of your organization that is kind of rotting it from the inside. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it does. If you have 10 people and one who's just really not fitting in, it can start haloing out to your other team members. So yeah, that's just a tip and a framework, the culture map, that I would suggest on that point as well. Anything to add, my Floors?
No, I mean, yeah, I think you're bang on with that. And yeah, maybe just going back to the phrase that I know you talked about it last week too, but the hire slowly, fire fast. Which has worked for us in that obviously we do always try and hire really thoroughly, but obviously over the last 5 years, we haven't always got it right. And we have been quick to say when we think that the fit's not right, because as Lauren mentioned now, it really does damage your team when you've got a small team, which we see this a lot with our female entrepreneurs, and that they've got a small team. And the issue with, I was speaking to somebody in recruitment recently, and she was saying the biggest issue she sees with female entrepreneurs when they start is that obviously you don't want to spend money on things like recruitment. So you recruit yourself, but you actually don't know how to recruit, if you obviously, unless you are a recruiter yourself. But most female entrepreneurs, they're starting a business out of passion for their idea. Their skill set is completely different. Now they're expected to know how to hire. And she said, you get people who interview amazingly. We've all seen that. We all know. And you think, oh my goodness, this person. And, we always do it within the Future Females team. Even we get so excited when we're interviewing because we feel like we can see the potential of how great this partnership could be. And the reality is you have to be able to look behind all of that and be like, okay, but what are the questions that I can ask in an interview to get underneath the good interviewer, facade, if it is a facade, and discover whether or not they are going to fit with your company long term. And so one of the things that we do, and coming back to one of the earlier questions, we always ask in our interviews which of the 5 core values people align with most and why. Because if people have to explain their reasoning about why they've chosen one more than any of the others, it means that, you can get a little bit more insight into whether or not that is a really core value for them, or whether or not, they're just sort of saying it because they feel like it's the right thing to say. So, yeah, I think being aware of the fact that you might not, although it's your company, you might not be the best person to be recruiting for it. And that it's a great idea to try and sort of upskill yourself, whether that's just like through reading, watching YouTube videos with recruiters about how to recruit well, how to interview well, and that sort of thing, so that you don't waste your time later on by bringing somebody in who then just doesn't fit with your team and starts damaging the company culture.
That's such a good point. And I mean, Floors, I am not a good recruiter, and I have learned that about myself. I love everyone I interview. I can find a job for anyone. I will find the opportunity. So I really had to learn discernment, but also now what we have as a really key part of our recruitment process is a practical task for every single role. Because like Flora said, someone might speak well, but actually when the rubber hits the road, do they deliver on time? If we give someone a practical task and they don't send it back by the deadline, they're automatically not getting the job, because this is them getting a job. Imagine once they're in it, if they're already missing deadlines and not performing. But secondly, then you can see in black and white and compare the actual deliverables and skill set that the job requires. So I think that's such a good point. And then the second thing, and again, this is so common and I see it and have done it many times. Often in entrepreneurship, you are hiring for a role you need now. We haven't necessarily had the longevity to be able to predict future workforce requirements like corporates can now do. So you're like, oh my gosh, I've got this project. It needs to be delivered next week. Who can I find to do it? And then you hire quickly, and then you don't necessarily get the same and best outcome. And my gosh, you guys probably know, like we do, recruiting is a painful experience. It is very time consuming. It can be draining, but it's not as time consuming as bringing the wrong person in, having to coach them, potentially go through a performance management process, re-recruit after you let them go for that role. You're going to lose so much more time and so much more money than having that longer and more detailed process up front.
Yeah. And maybe just to add one quick thing on this too. So I think it's also, and we always joke about how it's quite easy to, when you're interviewing, you see yourself in people. And because you know that you encapsulate the values of your company, you therefore think, oh, this might be the perfect person. But to also be aware that when you're hiring for a role, you also want to look at the skill set that they have. And obviously, we all have our gaps. And so if one of your gaps, if you know that you're really bad at, I don't know, sticking to timelines or something, then you want to try and find somebody who, yes, fits the role that you have, but also has the strengths that you're lacking, in the hope that then you can sort of balance each other out and they can help pull you up. So I suppose, yeah, be aware of that as a secondary thing, especially when you're a small team and you're, because again, it's things like if you've got 5 people in a company who are all, bad at keeping to deadlines or something, and then you've got one person that always pulls everybody else up, then you've got that positive influence to keep people on track. Whereas if you then hire another person who's quite similar to you and you all let that sort of slide, then it just becomes easier and easier, So definitely. Recruitment sorry, I'm just reading one of the comments. Recruitment can be such a black hole of a time. Yes, it is definitely. It's not an easy process. And as we say, you want to try and nail it so that you then don't have to do it again for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the time, so I just want to quickly reiterate the prize because we're going to award it in about 5 minutes, and then we'll take just 1 or 2 more questions. So please do pop them in your respective channel chats now. We're monitoring them all. So as a quick reminder, we have a prize at CEO Diaries that we award to someone who has been sharing, asking questions. It is a spot in our Level Up Launch Library program that really helps you run a successful launch for your business. So we will announce that person in just a few minutes. But let's take one more question first. Give me a second. Okay, I think let's go for Adekunbi, because we haven't had your question before. So if someone hired for revenue generation is not adding expected income to the company, but is sold on the company culture, what do you advise? Do you keep them on? No, you don't keep them on. I think a couple of personal reflections here. And I haven't historically been as good at this as I could be, but what I have learned is it's interesting your first hires, because particularly as a startup, they're your employees, but they also become your friends, right? And I think that you can start to blur the line. And Adekunbi, I don't know if this is your challenge, but I'm just speaking about me. The line can start to blur between really holding people accountable to the business priorities and the KPIs that you have set, which is your job when you're in work mode with CEO hat on. And then being compassionate for potentially personal situations they're going through, attitudes, even just passion for what it is you're creating, or having known them a long time, whatever your situation is. I would say that you need to approach this situation with CEO hat on. If they're not delivering for the business, then they're actually doing the business a disservice because someone else can. Making sure, of course, that your revenue generation targets are realistic, right? A lot of the time, we don't necessarily know what goal is realistic until someone is in the role already. But if it's realistic, then, and they're not meeting that criteria, then you do need to unfortunately rehome them. Your other option is coaching, right? So, and this again, and maybe this is kind of controversial to say, but when you're a founder, you typically have less capacity for coaching your employees than potentially in corporate, because you also have the rest of the business to manage. And so something I would say, and it's just a reality we live in, is to just assess your own time. Do you have the time to upskill that person to the point that they need to be to deliver revenue? And be super honest with yourself. If the answer is no, don't feel bad. That is the reality. So again, then they're not the right person for you. If you have that skill and you can make the time, the hours in the week, you can introduce them to different mentors and have that on the job learning, then amazing. But also, how long is that going to take? I think the bottom line is, if you have a KPI and it's not being hit, then that's not the right person for the job. Whew, I feel like a hard ass today, Floors.
Can I maybe add something on that? Because I'm going to say a massive generalization now, so please take this with a pinch of salt. But I've seen male entrepreneurs do this so much better than a lot of female entrepreneurs when it comes to being hard-lined on what your business actually needs. I think so often it's easy for us to get, sort of wrapped up in the fact that we found somebody who believes in our mission and we're excited to spend time with them and they're helping sort of inspire us and things. And as a female entrepreneur, that is super important, because that is where a lot of women get their inspiration and support from, is community and having people around them that also, believe in that. So I do understand from that perspective. But at the same time, it happened recently with a male founder I know, where he hired one of his very close friends to do a job, wasn't performing, and fired him immediately. And I honestly couldn't get my head around it. I was like, would you not have moved them into a different role? And he was like, no, he wasn't performing. I needed that role done, and he didn't fit it right. And so I had to find someone new. And so I think it is important to, there's what you might call feminine and masculine traits to entrepreneurship. And maybe one of the areas that, I also feel like I could probably lean more into is being more hard-nosed and being a bit more firm when something's not working, not being scared of whether or not it's gonna, someone's gonna be upset or you're gonna offend someone or something like that. But actually realizing that at the end of the day, what the business needs in order to support more entrepreneurs is we need people in the right roles, performing at the right level.
Absolutely, Floors. Thank you for jumping in on that. That's very true. Great. I think that I'm just scrolling back through all of the chats here. I think we have touched on most points, and we do always like to keep CEO Diaries punchy for you. I want to say, guys, it's very Australian for all of you who are tuned in, so that you do want to keep coming back. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. If you're watching this as a recording though, or if you do have an outstanding question, please still do pop it into the comments and we'll just be able to answer in writing on our respective channels. So this is not the end of this topic. We're just going to wrap up CEO Diaries specifically. And we're going to wrap up by announcing our amazing prize winner of the Level Up Launch Library. Actually, before I do that, if you want to learn more, this is some of the topics and the types of training that's required by female founders that have been coming through really strongly in our survey. So we will be creating content inside our new platform to help you with this. And not just content, but everything like downloadables, job description templates, recruitment process maps. So if you're feeling a little bit lost, make sure you're on the wait list, because that is going to be available to you very soon. The waitlist link is in the caption on every channel that we're currently live streaming on. So just make sure you're on there to get your access. And then without further ado, our winner is, can I announce, Floors, or do you want to?
Yeah, go for it.
Perfect. Our winner is Hasina. Hasina, thank you. You've been on since the very start of this session. It's been really interesting to get to know a little bit more about the challenges you're facing, and thank you for, I guess, just being vulnerable. Also, this question around, is there a platform you can use to give the basics of business? This prize, the Level Up Launch Library, I think will actually help you a lot with that. It will help you with your planning and some, I don't want to say basic, but like foundational strategies for being able to build your business. So I hope that you enjoy it. Please DM us your email address and we will send your access link and your login over to you as soon as possible, today or tomorrow. So yay. And to everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. We love these sessions so much. It's just amazing. Floor's next week's topic, is that defined and can we share it?
It is, yes. Next week's topic, let me make sure that I'm going to give the actual right one. So we're going to be talking about how to synthesize learnings from your year and how to set 2023 goals. So a very exciting one.
Amazing. So for everyone that needs a little bit of support on reflecting what worked, what didn't from their year, join and we'll do this as an interactive session. I'll take you through our process. And then it won't be an intense goal setting session, but I will share with you a framework for goal setting. And actually, we've also got a free downloadable. So join the session. We'll also give you that downloadable so you don't go into 2023 without a plan and without those goals set. So amazing. Floors, thank you so much for joining me. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
And to everyone tuned in, I will see you next week. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.